Bourgeois propaganda. Bourgeois propaganda reinforces and creates their ideology. To be clear, propaganda is any information conveyed through any form to promote a particular way of thinking. Virtually every Hollywood movie is bourgeois propaganda. Virtually all Western media is bourgeois propaganda. Virtually all Western songs are bourgeois propaganda. Intellectual fairness. Anyone who is interested in truth must give arguments opposing their own biases every benefit and consider them far more carefully than arguments which reinforce their own biases. Equally, they must minimize the value of arguments that reinforce their own biases. This way, we can, to some degree, overcome biases which inhibit the discovery of the truth. In the West, this means we must give overwhelming weight to arguments that go against those Western biases. Arguments against capitalism, which even for us on the left has propagandized us incredibly effectively with its ideology, must be given careful consideration. On the other hand, arguments in favor of capitalism, chauvinism, or indeed anything which comes from the capitalist ideology must be dismissed at any slight flaws and be considered highly critically. Of course, if one can be intellectually honest and overcome internal ideology, one can still come to conclusions which match one's own biases. When it comes to modern ideology and propaganda, Orwell is often quoted, in particular by liberals. However, on the topic of language in particular, he was the opposite of correct. His fundamental idea was that language is simplified to reduce the range of thinking. In reality, that is both empirically false. No regime has ever successfully significantly reduced language, and theoretically nonsensical. What is to prevent new words springing up to replace the old idea, which has supposedly been destroyed? In general, if there is a concept or idea worthy of a name, it will get it, even if it must be spoken in hushed voices. In reality, the real danger is actually the dishonest attempt to convince the population that actually similar things are different. The United States bourgeoisie have developed ways to obscure propaganda by calling it different things. For example, public relations, advertising, community management. Same is true of bureaucracy and the word bureaucrats. Administrators, managers, regulators, and executives are all euphemisms for bureaucrat. The word centralization and the general concept also has various stand-ins: vertical and horizontal integration, monopoly, scale. Of course, these words are distinct, and they have their individual uses and definitions, which should not simply be destroyed. However, we should work to reveal the true nature of these things, and naming them what they really are will help to do so. One of the leading tenets of bourgeois propaganda has for a long time been anti-communism. Any lie was admissible within Western media and other propaganda apparatuses if it was in the service of anti-communism. This is true to an absurd degree. The simple fact that the USSR was the nation most responsible for defeating the Nazis went from fairly well accepted in France to a minority position, largely through Hollywood propaganda. Less than 1/4 of the French population now accept this fact about the biggest event in recent history. In a more modern context, fake news has become a topic of much interest among the purveyors of bourgeois propaganda. Of course, the media has long printed false stories, from mistakes to outright fabrications. So why the new hysteria? One of the reasons is that the fake news is now chaotic in some part, no longer all pointed in the direction of serving American empire and anti-communism, though of course much of it still does. The only resolution to this crisis of fake news, such as it is either a return to the status quo, which of course is the desire of the bourgeoisie, where all news, fake or otherwise, will serve the interests of American empire and the American bourgeoisie. On the other hand, another resolution is that claims that are made in the media will be routinely investigated and their truth determined by various parties. Propaganda is probably the first dangerous AI application. Indeed, it's likely happening already. Companies like Facebook and Google in particular are not very open about their work creating propaganda AI. It will also be hard to see the effects. Social media will just be better at showing you content you care about and curating that content along ideological lines. Things hostile to advertisers will be suppressed in increasingly subtle ways.